Hello, and that's right. Today we want to return to the subject of hard drive and SSD compatibility with Synology NAS systems. Right now we've just about crossed over, at least at the time of recording, the halfway point of 2023, and Synology have rolled out their latest full release, DSM 7.2, and I thought now was as good a time as any just to quickly do a quick check on the old status quo when it comes to hard drive and SSD compatibility on Synology NAS systems, something that for the last 18 to 24 months has been something of an area of contention, with some back and forth between existing and potential Synology NAS users and the brand themselves. And in today's video we're going to be just double checking exactly where things are at with regards to a connected Synology NAS. We've got a couple of first and third party drives to play with here, and ultimately we're just going to talk about where things are at in case you are looking at upgrading to DSM 7.2 or you're a potential new Synology buyer and you are thinking about where compatibility is at due to the back and forth between the brand and users. So if we flick over to my screen now, we're able to see here on screen we're utilising a Synology DS 923+, and I will say very early doors during this video, straight away Synology have softened in some areas, not all, and I think it would be fair to say that a good 70 to maybe 75% of this video is going to be very, very positive, but there's still no denying that there are policies and positions that Synology have taken with regards to utilising third-party drives in their hardware environment, which has certainly continued to ruffle a lot of people's feathers. Now, another thing I should touch on, and I know this is a long intro, but it is very, very important, that when it comes to verifying drives that are compatible with any NAS system, for example, this is the DS923 and the listed first and third party drives that are compatible, you know, avoid brand to commit lots of man hours or woman hours to verifying individual drives for every single one of their systems takes time. Now, a lot of us would argue that when you look at a lot of SATA hard drives, they're all basically the same. Yes, there's tweaks in the firmware and the capabilities, but the architecture is largely the same. So a lot of users, you know, with a fair amount of, understanding, will just say, if one drive works on one Synology NAS, surely it's going to work on all of them. Why can't you list all of that? And unfortunately, because of arguably possible litigious nature of some companies, unfortunately some brands have to be quite careful what they list as verified and confirmed verified on their platform. Consequently, you can sort of understand why Synology might not go absolutely nuts listing the same drive that's compatible in one NAS as compatible with all of them until they actually verified it in person, physically with a drive. There is an argument for them not adding every single drive under the sun on their compatibility list. So we have to at least give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt there. However, not fully in some cases, but more on that later on. The big issue that a lot of people had in the DSM 7.1 version when it rolled out was of course to do with how third-party drives have been handled by the system. And when I was testing a lot of third-party drives in a few different Synology NASs in the XS and higher series, back then we started seeing certain drives appear as unverified and pushing out warnings to the end user. That was kind of where the big cohesion fallout between Synology and a lot of end users started. Now, this wasn't a full Synology range policy. It only applied to devices, I believe, from the 21 and 22 series onwards, and even then they had to be within the XS and higher tiers. A lot of the Plus series and the Value series didn't see it there, although if you did use a third-party drive, it did at least warn you that you were using a third-party drive, but didn't put the system status into anything warning-based. Now, that is not the case anymore, and although using third-party drives is still not as seamless as using their own drives in their own system, at least as far as usability and feature set is within Synology, the difference between them has been minimized, and this kind of a slightly pragmatic approach is no longer pursued there. And now when you do go to a Synology NAS here, this is the DS923, we're going to the storage manager here, we've got 3 hard drives and an M2 SSD that I'll talk about later on here. And if we look at these drives here, I can tell you right now this drive is not on that compatibility list. This is a Western Digital Ultrastar drive. If we make our way into that compatibility list there and we go to the top, listed down by the brand Western Digital, you'll see that that drive is simply not there. So this is a system running 3 drives in a RAID. It's running the very latest version of DSM 7.2 to bring that up there on the information center for you. So you can see we're using the latest version. We are using drives that are not on the supported list, and it's not putting the system into warning. It's not, threatening me in any way. And although if you do use third-party drives, the system will highlight that to you in some cases, and we'll more on that later on, I definitely think, at least as far as summer 2023 and DSM 7.2 is, it is certainly a less fractured way of portraying that information. Now, since the last time we properly discussed Synology and hard drive compatibility, it's worth highlighting that since then, Synology have indeed rolled out their own plus value series, I hate seagulls, of hard drives there that are built on Seagate hard drives and have got that whole firmware update and geared towards Synology utilization, they say. But the real takeaway here is, and again, I'm going to give them kudos for this, because they've rolled out these drives, but unlike the HAT 5300 enterprise drives, Synology have definitely looked at compatibility on these drives and been quite sensible about it. What do I mean by that? Well, when you look, for example, let's go back to it, the DS923 we saw earlier, and we go towards their compatibility list and switch over to Synology hard drives, you're able to see that not only does it have the HAT 5300 drives, but it also has the HAT 3300 drives, those new drives there supported on there, which is fairly understandable. But when you go into their past series of devices, so for this one, the DS1621XS Plus, we can see by scrolling down here that the 3300 series is not on there. They could have just retroactively bunged on compatibility of those drives onto the older NAS systems, but they didn't. Now, whether that's because they haven't tested them yet, I don't know. But what we really should square in on is that XS part of the name there, because it would have been very easy, given Synology's recent change in a lot of their XS series boxes, to only have support for their own hard drives if you want to stay within the cross, dot the I's and cross the T's of your warranty and support within that 5 year on those. It would have been very easy for them to add the HAT 3300 value tier into this system, because a lot of the complaints people made about when Synology took this rather firm stance on their own drives being in their own XS and higher systems was that a lot of users wanted to use Seagate, they wanted to use WD Reds, they wanted to use Ultrastar, EXOS, etc, etc. It would have been so easy for Synology when they rolled out these new Plus series drives to just add them onto the XS tier in order to allow these users that wanted to buy the XS series but didn't want to buy enterprise drives to still stay within that support and go for Synology drives. They could have just bunged them on it, but they didn't. And although it would have been easy for them to do it, and I'm sure they've annoyed some users by not doing it, I would say on the whole it shows a level of consistency that they didn't just chuck those drives on there. Had they done that, it would have kind of undermined the whole enterprise only drives and an enterprise only solution there. So them not putting them on there, I am actually going to give them credit for that, for not just bunging these drives onto that compatibility listing and therefore sort of undermine their own message about those systems and get caught out to be a little bit of a hypocrite. That was not the case. Then, of course, there is the question mark around when you do use a third-party drive, are you missing out on much in terms of what you can actually do within the storage manager? And I would say that within DSM 7.2, pretty much everything is on the table there. For example, here we go. This is Synology's own HAT 5300. It is the 16 TB drive. I'm just going to slot it in this NAS here. And once I've slotted it in, just going to give it, upwards of a minute to appear here on the listings of available drives from within Synology's storage manager in DSM 7.2. And what we're going to do is check a couple of things. One, we're going to see, are we able to at least get to the point where we can create a pool? We're also going to look at hot swapping and just looking at some of the things that we can do with their first party drives. And then we're going to remove that drive. It's now appeared. And then we're going to install a third party completely off the compatibility list drive to see the difference there. So there is our drive, the HAT 5300. So if we wanted to manage that drive and we wanted to create a storage pool, we can go ahead and click next. We're going to create ourselves a nice single basic drive, single drive configuration. We've got the drive, we click next. we can skip the drive check if we choose, and if we clicked apply, we would start creating that storage pool there. So if we come out of it, can we go for our hot spare? Of course we can, but what happens? We click next, we select the pool in question, we select that other drive there, we click apply, and as you can see, you can now create that hot spare with their first party drive. No surprise there. Going into the storage pool, going to the hot spare manager, going to the settings, it's all accessible to us, and indeed we're just going to delete that because we're going to be removing that drive shortly. Now again, going into the drive settings, going into what we actually can do with regards to health info on the drive, we've got the smart testing, we've got the history, we've got the overview, everything we're kind of used to seeing there. Everything is pretty much as you would expect with this drive. So now we're going to go ahead and remove that drive. Again, if you're doing this yourself, just make sure that normally you would let the drive spin down a little bit, but just for the purpose of this video and brevity, I'm just going ahead and doing a little quicker. This is the Seagate Ironwolf Pro 20 TB drive, very much not on their compatibility list. We're just going to pop that in there. Shut that in, and while it does that there in the background to recognise that drive, you'll probably hear it there in the background, and we make our way back to that DS923. As you can see there, we can't even get to 20 TB drives on this system yet. They're only going as high as 18. So even though Seagate Ironwolf drives are listed on here, if you go for the third-party drives, select that inside there, we can't even get to that height. There is still this issue of them only listing up to 16 TB drives in some systems, and more on that later on that I'm not a big fan of, but we'll go into more detail with that later on, and we still have to at least give them the tiniest benefit of the doubt that they have to verify every single drive, and that takes time. So this is something that might change later, but again, a little bit of crossroads. But here we go, we're going into the system here. Again, it is a bigger drive there. We're seeing a slight delay with regards to verification there. We can see the newly detected drive, but that's the one from earlier. Just taking a little bit longer. I already know that this drive is going to work within this system. I've already plugged it in earlier on, and there is our Seagate drive there. And immediately, as we can see there, it's detected the new drive. It sees that it's inside there. So what we can do is now go to the management there. We can create ourselves a storage pool if we choose. Click next. Again, we'll do exactly the same thing we saw before, but you're about to see one difference. So when we click next, it does highlight that it's not on the compatibility listing there. Again, that list that we just looked at. So we're still going to need to push past that if we want to use this drive, and we can create that pool if we choose. And what about hot spare? Does it stop us using a hot spare with a third-party drive? Well, I'm pleased to say that is not the case. We can go ahead, select that 20 TB drive. It's still going to warn us. From there, click OK. And it's created our hot spare. If we go to the settings there, everything is largely the same. In the drive database has been updated to the latest version. If we go for the health info there, we can see smarts on there. We can see all of our history options are there, just as we would expect. And if we make our way into the storage area, go into our hot spare monitor, we can see that it's running absolutely fine with exactly the same options there with how the hot spare will behave in response to the drive. So again, using third-party drives here doesn't seem, at least as far as traditional storage changes within Storage Manager and DSM 7.2, seem very, very good. So now we kind of move on to the area where, frankly, a lot of people are not going to be happy about in terms of compatibility with storage on a Synology NAS system. The first thing we've talked about on the channel before, but it's worth touching on for new users, is to do with M2 NVMe's. Now, in this system, we have installed an M2 NVMe in one of those base bays that is not on the compatibility list. And again, even if we give them the benefit of the doubt that there are quite literally thousands of different storage drives that need to be used in every single Synology NAS system, we will get on to why that's not really as defensible as you might think later on. But for now, we can see that drive. We can see that it's at least acknowledged by the system there. And if we go to managing that drive, with this third-party drive, if we want, we can create our area of SSD cache. It's only one drive. We can go for read-only with this verbatim drive. We can select basic. We can select the drive, and once again, unsurprisingly, it's warning us that that M2 NVMe is not on the available compatibility list there. Click next, and then if we click apply, we would be able to create that area of M2 SSD cache with that third-party drive. And again, Synology have their own range of SSDs as well, which you can use to create the caching on there. But where things change, and again, this is something that's been rolling in a lot larger in newer 2023 releases, as well as in DSM 7.2, is the use of M.2s as storage pools. And if we try to use that drive to create an M2 NVMe storage pool, it is still not possible. Indeed, when we look at the drive requirements, we're able to see that the system has just not only acknowledged as before that it has not been validated and listed as compatible, but also it just flat out won't let us. Now, if we were using one of Synology's SSDs, it would allow us to create that storage pool there. And this is something that this restriction has been maintained within Synology's DSM 7.2 platform. Again, what we can do with this SSD, there are, similar options using a first and third party drive. So going for the drive itself with the health information, we can run traditional smart attributes, as you can see. And from there, of course, we can go for more of the kind of standard tests and tasks that it allows you to do with first party drives. But there is still that restriction towards using third party drives for M2 NVMe storage pools. And again, whether it is the case or not with them, not adding these drives because of time management to add a full list of verified drives on the 1000 to the compatibility pages, it seems a little bit odd to me that the M2 NVMe storage pool feature is one of the few features that you would use in this more open compatible system that is restricted without their own storage media. Now, I could understand if it was running the whole of DSM from it, and maybe there is the counter argument that they want to make sure that they've got verified drives that could potentially have apps installed on them, as you might do with storage pools, but still nonetheless, that is something of an annoyance for some that want to take advantage of the much faster potential storage speeds and abilities of an SSD storage pool made of M2s. Now, this last point is something some of you, the more eagle-eyed of you, may have noticed earlier in this video, and I breezed past it then because I want to really focus on it now. And this is to do with the way Synology is displaying hard drive compatibility on their site. Now, I don't know if Synology is watching this video, but if you are, I'm not sure how much of a fan I am of the way you are listing the drives here on your compatibility pages. I know you listen to feedback, but at the same time, I think it's important to at least highlight this. Now, on the DS223J that's been released very, very recently, when I was going through a lot of the compatible drives for it, for my original news piece and Before You Buy coming up soon, I started listing the hard drives down there and I noticed something. Now, by default, Synology's media appears first, which, fair and well. I understand why they want to let people know that you can go for their own drives, and again, 4, 6, 8 and 12 TB. But if I want to see the third-party drives, I've got to go to a drop-down. Now, on the one hand, some people might find it convenient to separate first and third-party drives that way. Personally, for me, I'm not a big fan of that. I would rather see all the drives that are compatible and give me the filters at the top, as you always have done until recently, to see which drives I want to go for and use the filters that are given. This extra filter box here, if I want to go into third-party drives, I'm not a tremendous fan of. And with that, when we look at the list of drives here, we can see the range of drives that are on the supported categories here. On here, we can see all of the listed drives. It's one big page. Now, I'm going to save you counting. I'm going to look at my notes. There are 7 WD drives on there, there are 8 Seagate drives on there, and there are 36 Toshiba drives on this listing. Now, that might change later. It might just be going through the verification process and more drives are going to be added. But I know there are more than 7 WD drives that will work on this system, and I know there are more than 8 Seagate drives that will work on this system. Also, when we go to the capacity, it's only going up to 14 TB. Now, I can understand if a lot of users are going for a value series box, like the DS223J, that aren't really going to be looking at massive 20 TB drives that are between 4, 5 and 600 Nika depending on the brand. I get that you might be thinking that they don't want to use those drives, but still nonetheless, only going as high as 14 TB seems really odd to me. And again, it might be a verification thing, but still, I know this system can use larger drives than that. And the larger drives are not going to be drawing too much power. It's already got a 60 watt PSU as it is. Because of the lack of expandability of this device via an eSATA expansion, it means that when I set this up for the first time, I'm going to be quite concerned about, in a RAID 1 environment, how much overall capacity I've got. And that limitation to 14 TB on your compatibility list at launch seems like an odd omission. So not so much about the whole division of your own drives and third-party branded drives in this way, which again I'm not a tremendous fan of, but the compatibility does seem very, very small on that, and I don't know if that's by design or if it is something that's going to be updated later. That's something I didn't really enjoy. And when I move over to the portrayal of compatibility on some of the excess level systems, which we already know are largely Synology based drives on there. Up until recently, some of these XS level systems, like that 1621XS that we were looking at earlier on, that had those third-party drives listed on there, the newer release, the DS 1823XS Plus, doesn't even have the drop-down box anymore for those third-party drives. And Synology has clearly made a concise decision here that, you know, with regard to third-party compatibility and testing of drives here, they're not going to be adding those moving forward. And I think that's a bit of a shame that there's not even the option to see those other drives on there when the only drives that are listed on there are Synology-only drives. I get they're trying to maintain that line, and I mentioned it earlier on that I admire that level of consistency and commitment to this position they are taking on this, but still nonetheless, there were third-party drives listed, although not many, on other XS level systems, and this newer generation 23 series here has only further streamlined that compatibility and support listing there. So what have we learned as of hard drive and SSD compatibility in summer 2023 with DSM 7.2? Well, on the bulk of their systems, you can still use third-party drives, and indeed they've rolled out their own regular class NAS hard drives for those that don't want to go full enterprise. But there is definitely this division that's being created in their portfolio where XS and higher is being treated and more streamlined into their own drive media. Synology being very, very clear about this, and as every year goes by, it seems to be a much more concise and precise effort on this. However, it is all of these question marks with regards to the listing of greater compatibilities than 14 to 16 TB on third-party drives. What exactly is being done in Synology in the back end with regards to verifying third-party drive utilization on their platform? And is that just something they're going, we are taking that time and energy and resources and we're moving it over there, so we're not trying to support drives? And when you do submit drives, because there is a submission area where you can submit verification of drives that work, they still have to test that on their own side according to their TNC. So right now, using third-party drives is something you can do, and certainly if you are looking at the SMB and lower tier, and you know, to a lesser degree the sort of large-scale SMB, 24, 21 pluses and 22 pluses and such. But just bear in mind that right now there does seem to be a slow rundown in terms of drives that are being confirmed compatible. But that's enough of me talking. What do you guys think? Are you utilising third-party drives on your system environment? Or maybe you're about to buy Synology NAS and you're considering drives that aren't on the compatibility list, but you've got a better than average chance and confidence that they are going to be compatible. Let me know in the comments what you think. And apart from that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Use the free advice section and the links in the description to other content that we've worked on this subject, and of course the free advice section, the Discord, and the community forum Ask NAS Compares. Apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.